welcome back to Catholic Reboot. This is an episode called Christ First, Christ Last. And I'm not going to do what I normally do, which is provide you with a lot of scriptural verses or try to use the Socratic method of saying why it is we believe as we do as Catholics. What I'm going to say is, for the first time, maybe the last, I want to use common sense. Okay. Why do I call it Christ first, Christ last? Today we're in this malaise of trying to figure out what's going on, right? So we have great turmoil in our country, great turmoil internationally, great turmoil in our families. Everywhere we turn, we see something that disgusts us, right? We start to say, what's going on? What's happening? And I like to say, instead of living our lives as Christ first and Christ last, what we tend to do, and maybe this is our human nature, what we do is we say, me first, cultural second, Christ last. In many cases, Christ doesn't even make it into the equation. Me first, cultural second, and the next obsession that we're into is last, and we kind of go through this whole existing in our life, right? Now, this is where, if we could reach back to our grandparents, our parents, our great-grandparents, we would have had the perfect harmony of life, okay? Because they always went Christ first, Christ second, where's the video? Christ last, right? Always. Whatever their secular life was, they knew that it was just to get beyond and to have to get through those requirements of our duty of state. The typical having to have a job, having to raise the children, having to pay bills, having to prepare for when we're no longer going to work, and they were pretty organized in that. What we see today is completely different. Our ancestors had less education than us. They had a very simple life, but they had a deposit of the faith that I so wish our culture had today. What we tend to do is get caught up in what is going on in Washington, D.C., what is going on in our local community, and it's always one other ism, I call it. It's an ism, right? What's the fad of today? And especially with the internet, it's even worse, right? How many likes? How many instant gratifications can I get? And this whole deposit of our faith goes right out the window, right? So instead of waking up in the morning and saying our morning prayer, instead of at the noontime saying our Angelus prayer, instead of coming together as a family and eating and praying together, there's always something more important. And we get fed into this constant 24-hour news cycle, podcast of malaise that really doesn't provide anything to our salvation. Nothing. Zero. Most people are living their lives in a zero-sum game of the salvation of their soul. They're no longer sitting around instructing their family on anything other than current events. And so, and me myself, I mean, I kept I kept track of everything that's going on in the country and what's happening and how should I be involved and should I influence it. And I even taken my daughters into that big movement, into the Tea Party, and get involved in your country. Finally, it dawned on me, it's all a shell game if Christ isn't first, second, and last. If we don't wake up every day and say, what do I do to please our Lord? It's really, I mean, it's so simple. I mean, it's really ridiculously simple. And I think that's where we get kind of caught up in the nonsense of today. When Christ was on earth and he was preaching, did he ever get involved in local politics? Ever? Never. Matter of fact, he just flippantly said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, because he realized it's so futile, it's so ridiculous. Why? I mean, even if we look at the last 2,000 years of our church history, if we looked at all the political structures that came around, and we looked at all the empires that were created and all the interference that was going on, it didn't amount to anything. Nothing. It didn't lead to the deposit of faith if it didn't lead to Christ. And throughout our 2,000 years of our Catholic history, what we started to notice is, who were those great saints? Those saints were those that were always focused on Christ. 100% Christ. Christ first, like Christ second, Christ last. The deposit of the faith was, save my soul. Show me how to earn my salvation, right? What we're going through today is we're going through a complete apostasy, right? And what do we know apostasy to mean, right? It's renouncing Christ and his church. It's completely getting out of the way. Why? Because it's an interference to the secular world that we need to be involved in, right? And we kind of get caught up in this because even here in the United States, our country was founded on life, liberty, got to get the video right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? As Catholics, is that what we believe? Is our life on earth dependent on those three principles, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? It's not at all. Now, on a secular level, it works, okay? But we as Catholics, it doesn't work. What do we know as Catholics that our whole purpose here on earth is? It's not life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's to, and I said this in my very first episode, to know, to love, to serve Christ. And if we want to get any peace in our life, and if we want our children to kind of pay attention and get them away from the iPads and all the internet stuff, is we're going to look them straight in the face and teach them first Christ, second Christ, third Christ. Your whole life is Christ. Christ is a jealous lover. Give him the love. Don't worry about it. Honestly, I mean, should we be concerned about the state of our country and what's going on? For sure. I mean, it's our life. I mean, the way the country goes is the way we're going to be able to afford a living and what we're going to do. So we do have to be active in that way. The problem is when it starts to become our religion. You'll see these great conservatives, they're out there pounding every day. I mean, I'm a big fan of Steve Bannon and Mark Levin and Dan Bongino. I think they got good messages. Do you know the only thing that all of them are missing in their message? Christ. Have you ever heard Steve Bannon, Dan Bongino? Now, Dan Bongino will profess his faith once in a while, but to make it really true, make it the most important thing. Do we know that our current government is a foul? We do. Did Christ know his government at the time was a foul? He did. Christ always focused in on the salvation of the soul. Always. You know, you never heard Christ complaining about the Romans. You never heard him even complain about the local politicians. Even when the religious were afoul, he may have made reference to it. He took it upon himself to keep making the emphasis on God the Father and the divine. Even in his blessed are they who are humble, blessed are they who are poor. He was always instructing us to do one thing: look after the salvation of souls. He didn't get caught up in the local issues of the day. I mean, even when he met the woman at the water well, right? And this would have been someone that in his time should never have been acknowledged. He found common ground and basically was trying to save her soul. He may have rebuked her on her lifestyle, but his whole emphasis was salvation of her soul. I'm going to make this really quick, and I don't want to get into a long video on this. But as Catholics, our primary duty, and I don't care what age you are, if you're a young child, if you're an adolescent, if you're a super teenager, you're in your 20s, if you're raising your family, if you're done raising your family, if you're retiring, the instruction and the emphasis should always be Christ first, Christ second, Christ last. What do I do every day to put everything else aside? And prayer is important. But what can I do to just dialogue with Christ? Turn everything else off. You don't even need to read scripture. You need to sit there and you need to say, Jesus, what do you want from me? I'm a failed human being. I have all these temptations coming in and out all the time. The devil is working on me all the time. I know I'm not as strong as you, but I do know one thing, that if I ask you, what do you want from me? And if I make that question a constant question and say, everything that's going on in our society right now, I know that it's never going to change without you and your divine providence to change it, then I realize my plans are meaningless, right? And our prayer every day should be, tell me what you want me to do. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna be patient. I'm not gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna start my day when I wake up in the morning, and even before I get in the shower and do all that great stuff. When I put my feet on the ground, I'm gonna say, Jesus, what do you want me to do? And throughout the day, I'm gonna stop as many times as I can. I'm gonna say, Jesus, what do you want me to do? When I go to bed, I'm gonna say, Jesus, what do you want me to do? Jesus is a selfish lover. He wants you to constantly ask him, what do you want me to do? I love you. I know you came to save my soul. All this other nonsense going on does not make up for what I need to do that you want me to do, right? And this late stage of my life, what I'm realizing is I went through all these periods. Everything was so important at the time, you know. Went through the 70s, went through the 80s, went through the 90s, went through the 2000s. I was always focused on the decade, okay? And even when I was what I thought was practicing the faith and going to mass and saying my prayers, at this old age, I'm realizing what I never did is I never said, Jesus, what do you want from me? You are my first, you are my second, and you are my last. God bless. See you in another episode.